Welcome back to Detective Cammy's Capers and Japers. Today we join him on the verge of solving the infamous Ralsei case. Spoilers for Undertale and Deltarune ahead. Mr. Ralsei, is it? Or perhaps I should say, Prince from the Dark. Delta Warrior number 3, the Fun Gang's resident toothpaste boy.
Yes, that would be me, sir.
Interesting. Very, very interesting that you call yourself a Prince from the Dark when a prince is the son of a king and yet you don't have any parents on record. Care to explain that, Mr. Toothpaste?
Well, darkners don't have parents in the traditional sense. Perhaps I could explain it to you over a delicious cake and some tea.
Oh, you're a darkner, huh? Then answer me this. Why don't you follow the rules other darkners do? Why doesn't your fountain act like other fountains? Where'd you get your so-called prophecy in the first place? Why do you have knowledge of things you couldn't possibly know about? And what else are you hiding?
Sir, I'm literally just a little guy.
Damn it, he's good. But mark my words, I will find out what you are. Part 1. Who is Ralsei? This video was made possible by my Patreon. If you like what I'm doing and want to help out, or if any of the benefits on screen appeal to you, please consider giving me money today. And if not, just hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way. Thank you!
What's up, you little freaks? If you spent any amount of time in the Deltarune community, chances are you know of the many reasons why this little fruitcake is one of the most hotly debated topics in the fandom. Despite his fluffy boy appearance, Lil Bro is suspicious AF. Is he hiding something from us? Is he secretly evil? Is he a lightener or a darkener or perhaps a secret third thing? Is he Asriel? No. Is he piles of Asriel's dust? Now we're getting somewhere. In all seriousness, I come to you today, my dearest freaks, because I genuinely think I have the answer, and I'm surprised I haven't seen anyone else suggest it. This is actually no longer true. Shout out to Sonsakay. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone else, this is my all-encompassing Ralsei theory. I'm going to tell you who he is, what he's doing in this story, and yes, the identity of the man who left him to get the milk all those years ago. Now to start out, let's make sure we're on the same page. I realize a lot of you know this stuff inside and out, but I have it on good authority that Deltarune is literally coming out tomorrow. Or like a few months ago, maybe, depending on when I'm able to get this video out. That means Deltarune is about to hit the mainstream again, and there are going to be people re-entering this fandom who don't have a panic attack when they see a black and white picture of Woody Toy Story. I think it's only fair to make these theories a little more accessible for that demographic. I urge you fandom veterans not to skip this chapter though. There could be a point or two in here you've never considered before, and you might miss the part where I tell the funniest joke of all time. So let's review. Our first point of contention, and the question that kickstarted this theory in the first place, is if Ralsei is the prince of Castletown, where's the king? Now, before the experts come for me, I do understand that a prince definitionally doesn't have to be the son of a king. The word can also simply refer to a male relative of a monarch, or even the sole male ruler of a small state, which could very well apply to Castletown. However, I think it's in our best interest to consider the colloquial meaning of the word. Ask anyone on the street what a prince is. They're not going to go Merriam-Webster mode on you, they're going to tell you the prince is a son of a king, and I think it's much more likely that the game uses this word with the commonplace meaning in mind. Even if darkners don't have to have parents in the traditional sense, Toby calls Ralsei a prince from the dark, knowing that it will spark the question of what paternal figure Ralsei answers to, especially considering Lancer foils him in the first chapter and has a father himself. Even if Ralsei doesn't have a biological progenitor, we should be wondering who rules above Ralsei. Moving on, there's also the question of Ralsei's relation to Asriel. There seems to be some debate over whether he's supposed to look like Asriel specifically, or if he's just supposed to look like a member of the Dreamer family. So let's not mince words, Ralsei is supposed to invoke Asriel. His talk sprite has outward-facing horns with a hair tuft between them, he's a total sweetie pie with a dislike for violence, he likes to sing, and I cannot stress this enough, his name is an anagram of Asriel. Really feel like that one gets lost in the weeds sometimes. All this accounted for, though, he's also definitively not Asriel. He looks to be physically Chris and Susie's age, despite Asriel being college age. He comes across as socially ignorant when compared to the wildly popular boy we hear about in Hometown. And of course, he seems to have a crush on Chris, which I can only hope was not true of Asriel. Put all this together and we're left with a character who has an undeniable connection to Asriel, but can't actually be him unless Hometown is somewhere in Alabama. Another strange propensity of Ralsei's is his vast awareness of shit he should not know about. When Lancey, dude, worst ship of all time. When Susie wonders where Lancer is at the start of Chapter 2, he instructs Chris to grab everything from the abandoned classroom and bring it back to the supply closet, bringing the residents of the Card Kingdom to Castletown. It comes across as strange that he knows the layout of the Light World, but I'm hesitant to call it unique to him, because Queen also makes a comment about Cyber City being in the computer lab. Then there's the fact that Ralsei knows about the game's mechanics, UI, and buttons, though again, I can't say it's completely unheard of since Jigsaw Joe and his Polycule know about this stuff too. However, that brings me to Ralsei's wealth of knowledge that can't be reconciled. First of all, it's implied that he knows about the player's existence. During the scene in each chapter, when Ralsei tells Chris to think about what Susie is doing, the player's perspective is forcibly shifted to wherever Susie is, and when the camera returns to Ralsei and Chris, they're at the tail end of a conversation, Ralsei saying,
"So that's why, okay, Chris?"
However, that's not the only strange conclusion we can draw from these scenes where he prompts the camera to leave. He also knows about events in the story that haven't transpired yet, specifically Noel and Susie's Ferris wheel ride. Take a look at the Weird Route version of this scene from Chapter 2.
Chris, don't you wonder how they're doing in there? I said, don't you wonder how Noel and Susie are doing? You're right, Chris. It has only been 30 seconds. I'll wait a minute first.
Alright, let's go.
Huh? What? Wait, we were supposed to...
Hey, let's go.
Wait, Susie. What, happened in there?
What do you mean, what happened?
In there with Noel?
Nothing.
Nothing? Nothing at all?
Just told her everything's a dream. Now she's feeling better.
Anything else?
No, and let's go.
Ralsei is showing his whole ass here. He knows Susie and Noel were supposed to take a Ferris wheel ride together and is baffled that it didn't happen. This is made even more clear by his line when you backtrack to the Ferris wheel billboard in this city. It's an advertisement for a giant Ferris wheel.
Susie is surely thinking of her ride with Noel.
Even in the route where the Ferris wheel ride does happen, Chris and Ralsei are not there to witness it. Yet in both routes, it's abundantly clear that Ralsei knows it's supposed to happen. That brings me to one last line to tie this all together.
Chris, once we pass through this door, our adventure will really begin. A journey foretold exactly by the prophecy.
A journey foretold exactly by the prophecy. I don't know about you, but that's not the prophecy I heard. I only heard about some vague world-ending type shit that's supposed to go down at the end of the game, yet Ralsei claims the entire journey has been foretold exactly. Considering we didn't even know about the roaring until Chapter 2, I think it's very likely that Ralsei still hasn't shared the entire thing with us, and that it may be a lot more specific than we think. Next, let's discuss Ralsei's species. First things first, he cannot be a Lightner. He sports a colored character portrait, whereas Lightners are uniformly monochromatic, and his body totally vanishes when he's fallen in battle, whereas Chris and Susie only collapse. However, despite heavy implication that Ralsei is a Darkner, the game never outright states that he is. The prophecy calls him a Prince from the Dark. The stat menu calls him a Dark World being, but no one uses the word Darkner in reference to him, not even himself. Take a look at this exchange from late Chapter 1.
Just walking along with you guys feels nice. Like I'm doing something important. That's because you're alongside the Lightners, Lancer. Our purpose, Darkner's purpose, is to assist them.
The interesting thing about this dialogue to me is that this is the closest Ralsei gets to straightforwardly calling himself a Darkner, but he just skirts around it. The most straightforward interpretation is that he's clarifying himself as a Darkner here, but on the other hand, you could read it as a distinction being drawn between the phrases our purpose and Darkner's purpose. After all, we already know that Ralsei tends to lie through omission. That is, he doesn't outright tell untruths, but he's comfortable leaving people ignorant to the truth. We see this at the end of Chapter 2, where he doesn't mention the roaring as part of the prophecy until the last possible moment, when some fuck-ass chicken nugget's about to cause the roaring in front of him. Now this brings us to the one point I haven't personally seen anyone else discuss.
Hey.
What? Oh, right. Okay. Okay, I've just been reminded that I promised the funniest joke of all time would appear in this segment, so let me just get my note cards. Okay, here it is. Why did the chicken cross the road? To protect his best friend from being emotionally manipulated into a murderer, only to fail and meet his own fate at her hands. Hey, where are you going? Where you go? Now, everything I've discussed so far might be familiar to you, but this brings us to the one point I haven't personally seen anyone else discuss, and the reason I think Ralsei cannot be a Darkner. When you first meet him in Castletown, he says this.
I've been waiting alone here, my whole life for you two to arrive, so I'm really happy to meet you.
This may not come across as new information to you, but if we think critically about how Darkners work, this shit does not make sense. Darkners are established to have memory of the time before their Dark Worlds are opened. We know from Sham that there was a time before the Card Kingdom fountain arose when all 4 kings ruled in peace. We know from Sweet Cap and Cakes that Queen was never this tyrannical before the Cyber City fountain was opened. Most significantly, we know Spamton's memories reach back to 1997 at the very least, if not longer. I think the most logical way to look at this is to assume that any given Darkner has memories that stretch back to whenever the object they're based on was created. Not only that, but we know King and Queen have a history together despite being from different Dark Worlds, meaning that Darkners can have memories of other places they've been to and other Darkners they've come into contact with. Taking all of this into account, how is it possible that Ralsei has been alone in Castletown all his life? That would mean that whatever object Ralsei is created from has been in the school supply closet for its entire existence, from the very moment it was created and has never left. I acknowledge that Ralsei could simply be lying about this, but I personally don't think so. He comes across genuinely unsocialized, like Chris and Susie are the first people he's ever met, and we've already discussed that he tends to lie through omission rather than explicit falsehoods. This revelation throws a fat wrench into some of the most popular explanations for what object Ralsei could be. Based on some optional text from Chris's house, a lot of folks speculate that Ralsei could either be the pair of red demon horns Chris would wear as a child, or the green crayon missing from the drawer in the hallway. But if either of these stories were true, Ralsei would have memories of being in the Dreamer House Dark World, memories of the other Darkners there, and a deep familiarity with Chris. I think the only popular Ralsei interpretation that survives this is the Chris's Fursona theory. The idea that Ralsei is a drawing Chris made of their ideal self as a child, wanting to grow up to be like Asriel. Since Toriel works at the school, I admit it's not impossible that Chris could have made this drawing in the supply closet and left it there, but I'm still not done yet. One more quirk of Ralsei's is that he does not have a good sense of time. When Chris and Susie return to the closet in Chapter 2, this exchange happens.
Chris, Susie! It's been ever so long!
Yeah. It's been what, a day?
Oh, that is short, isn't it?
Ralsei waits a single day for Chris and Susie to come back and acts like it's been a lifetime since he's seen them. This doesn't mesh with the idea that he's been waiting alone in Castletown for years. Waiting a day would be baby shit for him. If a day seems like an eternity to Ralsei, it lends itself much more to the idea that Ralsei hasn't existed for very long at all. To me, this reads like another lie through omission. Like he has waited alone in Castletown his whole life, but maybe his life started a week ago. Maybe his life started the same morning we met him. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let's focus on Castletown next. It has some strange properties that other Dark Worlds don't seem to have. For example, when you look through a Shadow Crystal in the Card Kingdom or Cyber City, you'll see a vision of the abandoned classroom and computer lab, respectively. However, doing the same in Castletown doesn't show you the supply closet. It shows you nothing at all. Additionally, Chris and Susie can enter and exit Castletown as they please. You might argue that we simply don't know enough about Dark Worlds to claim this is a unique trait, but let me remind you of something Lancer says when we meet him.
We both know you'll go east. It's your only way home. But I, Lancer, won't let you go there.
This dialogue makes explicit that heading east to seal the Card Kingdom fountain is Chris and Susie's only way home, and it checks out. We have no way to exit the main Dark Worlds in either chapter before sealing the fountains. This solidifies to me that not only is the ability to come and go from Castletown an unusual trait, but also implies that it somehow gained the trait overnight. Then there's the fact that, much like Ralsei, who doesn't turn to stone in other Dark Worlds, Castletown doesn't turn other Darkners into stone. We're led to believe this is all because of the Grand Fountain. It's supposedly very important. Not only is it made of pure darkness, which allows any Darkner to live there, but it's implied to be important in maintaining the balance of light and dark by these lines from the prophecy.
Today, the Fountain of Darkness, the geyser that gives this land form, stands tall at the center of the kingdom, but recently another fountain has appeared on the horizon. And with it, the balance of light and dark begins to shift.
It's not made perfectly explicit, but this passage implies that Castletown's existence is the default, the status quo. When the Grand Fountain stands tall, light and dark is balanced. When another fountain appears, that's when things get thrown out of whack. But how could the Grand Fountain be this long-standing, universe-balancing monolith when it's inside the school supply closet? A place that school staff has to enter at minimum once a week. Probably even more since a certain somebody started eating all the chalk. What I'm saying is that the Grand Fountain, much like Ralsei, cannot have existed for very long. Ralsei and Castletown are anomalies. They don't follow the rules of what they're supposed to be. They're unnatural. They don't fit into the world like they should. Something doesn't smell quite right here, and trust me, it's not me. I checked.
And that's not even the beginning of the dirt I have on you. How do you like them apples, goat boy?
I love apples, and I love cake, and I love my friends Chris and Susie, and...
Now that you know I mean serious business, maybe you'll cooperate. Tell me, what is your relationship to this man?
I'm sorry, I can't seem to remember who that is.
Oh, wait, sorry. This man!
That's my dad.
Wait, really?
Yep.
God damn it. He wasn't supposed to say that. This must be exactly what he wants me to think. I'm caught right in his trap and I didn't even know it. Unless, of course, he's using reverse psychology and wants me to think I'm in his trap when I'm on the verge of finding him out. But that, of course, would be ignoring the possible inverted reverse psychology, where he wants me to think that I figured out I'm not in his trap, when in fact I'm in a larger trap around that trap. Shit. If only I could read his mind. Part 2. What is Ralsei?
You need a big shot? I got your big shot right here. We got 12 delicious flavors, and you'll love them all.
Save Center has all your big shot tailgate party needs at prices too low to mention.
So far, we've concluded that Ralsei is a prince missing a king, that he's undeniably associated with Asriel, he's neither a Lightener nor a Darkener, he and Castletown haven't been around very long, and that he knows much more of the prophecy than he's letting on. Where does that leave us? How do we put all these bits and pieces together, and how on earth do they help us find Daddy? Well, to answer that, let's talk about where he got that prophecy from. When we first meet Ralsei, he says,
There is a legend in this land. A legend that one day 2 heroes of light will arrive and fulfill the ancient prophecy foretold by time and space.
He claims that the prophecy was foretold by time and space, which sounds cosmic and vague at first, but there's only 2 other utterances of the words time and space found anywhere in Deltarune or Undertale. The first...
Alphys might work faster, but the old royal scientist, Dr. W.D. Gaster, one day he vanished without a trace. They say he shattered across time and space.
And the second instance is from when you check So Sorry. But I'm cool pretending he doesn't exist if you are. This phrasing already lends itself to a connection between Gaster and the prophecy, but of course you might know we have another bombshell. The fact that the words, 3 heroes appeared to banish the angels' heaven were written out in wingdings on Deltarune.com in 2016, 2 years before Deltarune was even announced. I think these 2 pieces of evidence all but confirm that Gaster and the prophecy are linked in a significant way. And personally, I think it makes the most sense that he wrote it himself, considering its very first appearance was written in the font he speaks in. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into Gaster speculation here. It's clear by now that he has some sort of connection to Deltarune. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the Device Theory by Mollystars. It's easily the most comprehensive Gaster analysis on the platform as long as you have 10 hours to spare, link in the description. I'm not trying to get at exactly what the nature of that connection is, or exactly what Gaster is trying to do with his influence over the world of Deltarune.
At least not in this video.
But I think it's entirely reasonable to speculate that if Gaster wrote the prophecy, Gaster wants to see the prophecy fulfilled. And of course, that brings me back to Ralsei. Ralsei's motivation, above all else, is to fulfill the prophecy. Everything he says, everything he does is in the interest of bringing it to fruition. From the moment he meets us, he's begging Chris and Susie to fulfill their destiny as the Delta Warriors, and Chapter 1's entire arc is convincing Susie to join them. He's constantly worried about keeping them happy so they'll stay on the set path. After the terrifying Spampton Neo fight, even when Susie wants to talk about it, he brushes it off, saying,
I don't think it meant anything, Susie. It seems like it was just a corrupted program. He turned into our ally, so let's just accept it.
He'll betray his morals to keep Chris happy if they choose to be violent, saying,
Chris, in the end, what you choose is up to you. As long as you're happy with it, I'm happy too.
And if Chris is especially aggressive toward the dummy during the tutorial fight, he'll say,
Well, if during our adventure, if you want to hit me, that's okay too.
Ralsei's number one priority is to keep himself, Chris, Susie, and by extension the player, on the prophecy-fulfilling path. If you believe that Gaster wrote the prophecy, then Ralsei's goals in this story are Gaster's goals. On top of that, Castletown is named after the player, a name that you've only ever typed into this game when Gaster asks for it in the intro sequence. So...
real talk.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm the first person to draw a connection between Ralsei and Gaster. I'm not expecting you to fall to your knees and weep when I say, yes, Gaster is the absentee father I've been talking about all this time. I mean, the thumbnail pretty much spoiled it already. The fandom has been talking about this connection for ages. Sure, calling them father and son is a unique angle, and being able to call Gaster the King of Darkness is kinda sick, but if you know your way around Deltarune, you probably saw this coming from a mile away. But, my dearest freaks, this is the part where I admit that I've buried the lead. This video isn't just about Ralsei's absentee father. This video is about what Ralsei really is. The secret third thing I've been hinting at all this time. Every single point I've touched on so far has just been prep for the big reveal. Just setting up pins to knock over with my big fat theory bowling ball. And I think it's time to roll a strike. And that will be happening right after this fucking sentence. Ralsei is a goner. Now let's catch up in case you're unclear on what I'm talking about. When I say goner, I'm referring to these guys. Most of them are locked behind fun events in Undertale, excluding the vessel, who's created during Deltarune's intro sequence. The term comes from the file names of these three: Clam_Goner, MK_Goner, affectionately referred to as Goner Kid, and the vessel, whose each individual part in the intro sequence includes the word Goner. The other three are simply called Gaster followers in the files, but due to the obvious similarities are generally agreed upon to be Goners as well. Not a lot is known about the nature of these NPCs. For a while, the popular assumption was that they were all shattered across time and space in a similar way to Gaster. However, Deltarune gave us a huge insight into exactly what these grayscale goons are. At the beginning of Deltarune, we learn that Gaster makes Goners. The how and why of it is all unclear, but during the intro sequence, commonly known as the Goner Maker sequence, Gaster offers us several different options to customize our Goner, assembles it for us, and allows us to name it before it's ultimately discarded. The hypnotic background of this sequence features an image called image_depths in the files. This same image is used one more place in the game, as the texture for a dark fountain seen up close. The depths are also only mentioned once, in a foreshadowing line from Jevil.
Soon the queen returns and hell's roar bubbles from the depths.
It's difficult to draw a conclusion about the depths from this evidence alone, but given their relation to dark fountains and the roaring, I'm comfortable saying this image is supposed to represent extreme darkness, or dare I say, maybe the sequence takes place somewhere beneath the dark fountains, or maybe inside a dark fountain itself. In any case though, we see a Goner being created in this place, and that makes Goners the second type of being we know of that comes from the dark. Now I know what you're thinking.
Hey, you stupid fucking fuckface, why isn't Ralsei fucking gray?
And while I do think you could stand to be less vulgar, I do have an explanation for that. Goners do not have to be gray as a rule. Sure, they tend to appear grayscale by default, but think of Clam Girl. She's fully colored for the majority of the time you speak to her, only turning gray for the very last line before she disappears. You might argue that this isn't the same person and that Clam Girl is replaced by the Goner version, but I wouldn't agree. Her dialogue reads like this.
So you never met my neighbor's daughter. But please don't despair, because the time that you will meet her
is fast approaching.
I think the fact that she changes while talking, yet still finishes the sentence she started, lends itself to the idea that this is the same person. Not to mention, when she teleports away, regular Clam Girl doesn't come back in place of her, she's just gone. And of course, none of the other Goners replace the NPCs they're based on, so who's to say the other Goners don't have a non-grayscale appearance as well? Another similarity I want to point out is that goners, as a rule, are all based on a pre-existing person. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe Gaster has some sort of intention behind it, maybe it's somehow a limitation of the creation process, but each goner uses an existing character as a base, making heavy alterations to their features but keeping their general body shape. Most of these are self-explanatory, different expressions, clothes, and body patterns, but once again, let's take a look at Clam Girl in particular. It's tempting to just list her colored variation as the NPC she's based on, but since I'm arguing that the colored variation still is the goner, I want to make the argument that she's actually the goner version of Clam Guy. Clam Girl and Clam Guy have identical silhouettes, just mirrored, and NPCs with identical silhouettes are very rare in Undertale. Each one has their own awkward MS Paint charm, even members of the same species, but the clams are two versions of the same sprite, just with a different color palette and a crown switched out for a leaf. Hey, you know who else looks exactly like a pre-existing character but with altered colors and clothes? Fucking this guy! The last point I want to make regarding these guys is their ability to teleport. Both Gaster Follower 2 and surprise surprise Clam Girl
I was gonna do that, and then I came back and
disappear after you talk with them, making the exact same sound Mystery Man makes when he disappears. You probably know where I'm going with this already. The fandom has been fighting forever about how Ralsei gets around between Dark Worlds. He's not in Chris's pocket as far as we know, yet he arrives in the computer lab just as soon as we do, and gets back to Castletown all on his own after both chapters. For a while, I've been willing to believe that we're just not supposed to think about it too hard, but you have to admit the goner explanation fits in really nicely. I don't know for sure if this is an innate ability they have, or maybe Gaster himself is just moving them around as he sees fit, but either way it makes sense. Essentially, what I'm proposing here is that Gaster isn't Ralsei's father in a biological sense, but in the sense that he creates goners, and therefore he created Ralsei. Ralsei was inserted into this world, and by extension this story, to play exactly the role he's playing. He's here to guide Chris, Susie, and the player through the story and fulfill the prophecy, all according to Gaster's will. Castletown fits this mold too, an artificial dark world that doesn't seem to naturally fit into the world at all, but serves as a plot device to put things in motion and a home base for the heroes later on. I think the argument for Ralsei being a goner is really strong, and if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's that. This was my big, even if the rest of the theory is wrong, we should be thinking about this point. However, as the ADHD timecode watchers in the audience might have noticed, we're not nearly done. I've given you the plausible version of the theory, but this is where I take my jump into the deep end. And dear viewer, you're coming with me. I've already tied cinder blocks to your ankles. You're fucked.
And there it is. Read 'em and weep, Peach Boy. I know what you are. What do you have to say for yourself now? Come on, say something. Or are you too afraid to admit that the jig is up? That I've read you like a damn book? Fuck you. What?
Fuck you, pig! I know my Miranda rights. I'm not saying shit till I have a lawyer. A-cab!
Oh my god. You can't say that on you. I don't think you can say that on YouTube.
Fuck you, pig! A-cab!
You're gonna get me demonetized!
A-cab! A-cab!
Oh my god, why am I a cop? Why did I depict myself as a cop? The optics on this are terrible. Part 3. Why is Ralsei?
So I've taken you through what Ralsei is, what his purpose is, and who created him. But if all this is true, we're left with a glaring question. If Ralsei, as a goner, was created for the purpose of fulfilling Deltarune's prophecy, what the fuck's going on with these guys? To answer that, we need to ask what we already know about the other goners. First of all, let's look at the Gaster followers. These three bootlickers all exist primarily to give exposition on Gaster's backstory, but one lesser talked about detail is that they all have extreme reverence for the big man, saying, "What an act to follow, his brilliance was irreplaceable. Alphys might work faster, but the old royal scientist Dr. W.D. Gaster?" They all clearly have a huge amount of respect for him, which would only make sense if he's the one who gave them life. Next up is Goner Kid. You find them alone on a dock and waterfall looking out over the darkness as they seem to be having an existential crisis, saying,
Have you ever thought about a world where everything's exactly the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you? The thought terrifies me.
For a long time, popular speculation has connected this concept to Gaster, saying that whatever happened to Goner Kid to erase them from their world must have happened to Gaster as well when he was shattered. Though it is worth making note that they don't explicitly mention Gaster at all. Finally, the belle of the ball, once again, Clam Girl. She is easily the most fascinating for our purposes. She first appears in her colored form and mentions that Frisk looks the same age as her neighbor's daughter, Susie, and that they should be friends, which mirrors the friendship between Susie and Chris in Deltarune. Strangely, Susie is spelled with a Y rather than an IE like in Deltarune, but even so, there's no way you could call it a coincidence. Even more strangely, when you talk to her again, she says,
"In life's grand scheme, she might be why you came here in the first place."
Finally, only in an update made to the Switch version of the game a few months before Deltarune's release, if you talk to her after fighting Asriel in the pacifist route, she says that the time we'll meet Susie is fast approaching. And that's where she turns grayscale. Not only that, but talking to her in this update will also change the photo album in Sans' workshop to say "Don't Forget." Deltarune foreshadowing up the wazoo with this one. So what the hell? 3 of them are in love with Gaster, 1 of them is experiencing ego death, and 1 of them has played Deltarune. Where does that get us? Well, let's connect some dots and talk about Gaster's relation to Deltarune. Again, this video isn't a Gaster theory. My goal here isn't to pour through all the evidence and pretend I know the last time Gaster farted. I just want to discuss some stuff we can reasonably assume to be true. First of all, as previously discussed, I think it's likely that Gaster wrote the prophecy and wants it fulfilled. Secondly, I think we can be reasonably sure that Gaster has some amount of control over Deltarune's world, and that can be deduced from the Chapter 1 save menu. If you're not familiar, if you access the save file menu before beating Chapter 1, it looks completely different compared to how it looks later on. Instead of the lovely portrait of Chris, Susie, and Ralsei in front of a fountain, we get plain green text on a black background, cold and clinical, like the interface of an old computer. And when you start messing around with it, it starts saying Gastery type shit. Try to copy a save file, it says,
"Choose the target for the reflection."
Try to erase one,
but it was already gone.
Change your mind about erasing?
Very interesting.
There's a lot of really fascinating text to dig through with this menu, but the main takeaway here is that it's very obvious Gaster is controlling these save files for you. And when you think about it, that's kinda terrifying, right? Gaster has godlike power over the world of Deltarune. I'm saying this regardless of what Deltarune's world actually is, whether it be an alternate universe, alternate timeline, simulation, video game, tiny speck of dust floating by in the air, wondering how and why. Whatever experiment Gaster is performing here is predicated on his ability to duplicate it, delete it, or begin it all again as many times as he wants. However, despite Gaster's ability to oversee this world, it seems that he doesn't have any control over the events that happen in it. He tries his best to exert influence over them by writing the prophecy and sending in Ralsei to enact his will, but he can't make direct contact with the world himself. Or rather, maybe he can, but it doesn't really turn out well for anyone involved. Looking at the Javelin Spampton in the room. Wow. That's not gonna make it. That's why he recruits the player's help, connecting us to the world of Deltarune, because we can take part in the story for him and help bring the prophecy to fruition. Now, here's where I need you to take sort of a big leap with me. Oof. If Gaster has the power to replicate and reboot this world at will, who's to say he hasn't run this experiment before without our help? Is it possible that he's tried to fulfill the prophecy before we showed up, but failed and had to start again? Now, maybe you're thinking to yourself,
"Hey, isn't this just time loop theory with extra steps?"
And to that, I say, shut up. But basically, here's what I'm proposing based on all this. What if Ralsei isn't the first Goner to take up the mantle of Prince from the Dark? Have you ever wondered what the deal with Ralsei's cloak is? Why is he wearing that when we first meet him? The easy answer is that he's wearing it to hide his true appearance from Chris and Susie, but he hides his appearance behind his hat the entire chapter. Doesn't it seem redundant to have an additional piece of clothing to hide behind, only to remove it minutes after meeting him? And why is he wearing this cloak in the imagery from the prophecy? When the silhouettes of the human, monster, and Prince from the Dark show up, the human and monster are very clearly supposed to look like Chris and Susie, yet the Prince from the Dark looks nothing like Ralsei. I think it's because this cloaked appearance wasn't made to just be Ralsei. It was made vague enough to resemble anyone who puts on the cloak. Picture this. Gaster boots up a new save file, sticks in an all-new goner to fill the Prince from the Dark role, or Princess, I guess. Thanks for making me mention you again, Clam Girl. And watches as they try to guide Chris and Susie through the prophecy. When they fail to make the prophecy come true, they're discarded, much like what happens to the goner we create in the intro. And these discarded goners, the ones who tried and failed to fulfill the prophecy before Ralsei, are what I think the goners from Undertale are. It all clicks together. The Gaster followers have this godly reverence for him, which would make sense if they feel they've disappointed their creator in some way. Clam Girl knows who Susie is, and here's the one that made my own jaw drop. Goner Kid is deathly terrified of a world that functions perfectly without them, which would make perfect sense if they were created to help this world function, but failed and were banished from it. They fear their own inadequacy, that the world functions perfectly without them. I think this even lines up with the other way the term goner has been used in these games. At the end of Undertale's pacifist route, Azrael's big final attack that deletes the universe itself is called the Hyper Goner. I think that lends itself to the idea that a goner is someone who's been unnaturally deleted from the universe they reside in, which would also be true of the failed princes in my interpretation. Of course, that would imply that goner is a universal term and isn't actually the word for the kind of being that Gaster creates from darkness, which is why I've taken to calling them pawns. Now, before we're done with this section, there's one more stretch I want to make. First, I want to establish something we can most likely agree on. If you believe the popular theory that Undertale's Sans comes from Deltarune, and you should, it's basically canon at this point, that means that Undertale has to come after Deltarune. Even though they're in separate universes, you have to believe that the events of Deltarune precede Undertale's events to believe that Sans wants to return to Deltarune. Now here's my last proposition, and it's going to take us all the way back to the state of theorizing in 2018. What if Ralsei really is the river person, who's been discarded after the events of Deltarune? Yeah, I know back then the comparison between them basically just came down to the cloaks being similar, but those are some similar fucking cloaks, dude! Not only that, but just like Clam Girl, the river person knows all about Deltarune. They know about Onion-san's song from the sea, they know about Gaster, the man who speaks in hands, and they know about Sans, the man who came from the other world. On top of that, they both like to sing, and they both use the same text sound. Not Ralsei's kind of voice, but the generic text sound, which Ralsei uses when he's still wearing the cloak, like the river person. You might argue that the genders don't match up because the river person uses they them, but as a reminder, the only text we have about the river person's gender is this.
Tra-la-la, I am the river man. Or am I the river woman? It doesn't really matter.
They don't specify that they're non-binary, only that their gender doesn't really matter, which lines up quite nicely with this other line.
Tra-la-la, what's my name? It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. His gender, his name, who he is doesn't really matter, because Ralsei never really knew what being Ralsei-like even meant. He wasn't created as an individual, he was designed to fill an assigned purpose, and without that purpose, he's aimless. All he can do is follow his nature, remaining unseen and out of the way, serving whoever lets him, treading water forever. Jeez, that's a downer.
You really did it. You figured me out.
You bet your ass I did. Now what, huh? You gonna cry, piss your pants maybe? Maybe take a big sad shit? Oh God. Don't cry. Hold on. What if this is just another trap? You can't let yourself fall just because he's cute, Cammy. Get a hold of yourself. This is a criminal you're talking to. Wait, don't cry. Hey, how about, what if I, dropped all your charges? Would that make you feel better, little guy?
That would be lovely. Thank you, sir. Can I make you a cake as thanks?
Sure, kid. Nicely handled, Cammy. As always, you're in complete control of the situation. Part 4. How is Ralsei?
Oh, what a beautiful day for fun. What would you like to do? Party. That's a wonderful idea.
Now, I've laid out the whole theory for you, but this wouldn't be a Cammy Boy G video if I didn't explain how this all fits into my insane fanfic version of Deltarune's overarching plot and themes. So that's what this section is for. In my last video, I claimed that Ralsei would be the pawn we fight in Chapter 6. And I know you guys want answers, but first let's catch up anyone who isn't in the loop. In short, my vision of Deltarune's plot is that there is no singular knight that the heroes are chasing, but instead knight is a title given to anyone who opens a dark world. Thus, the dark world each chapter takes place in is made by someone entirely different. I also believe in chess theory, the idea that each major boss will be named after a chess piece in descending order, meaning that we'll fight knight in Chapter 5 and pawn in Chapter 6. I propose that Chapter 5 would be Asgore's dark world made in his flower shop, and because he's the knight of that dark world, the heroes would mistakenly believe that he's the knight who's been making all the dark worlds and fight him. That would then lead to Chapter 6, where they discover Pizza Pants' fountain in Ices and are completely blindsided, thinking they've already stopped the night. This fountain being in such a public place would fully let the secret out, teaching all the town about dark worlds. Fountains would begin sprouting up all over town, and Noel's fountain, the Angel's Heaven, finally ushers in the roaring. If this sounds far-fetched to you, it's because it is, but please watch my other videos on the matter before you're mean to me. I'm very cute and I'll cry if you're mean to me. This is what I look like in real life, actually. Now, let's bring Ralsei in and talk about the arc he would have in this story. Ralsei has known from creation that he is Gaster's pawn, a tool with a purpose, and I think that's where his identity issues stem from. He exists only to serve a master, be it Gaster, Chris, or even Queen. He has no idea what to say when anyone shows him affection, or thinks of him as anything more than a lackey, and of course there's the famous dialogue from the Swan Boat.
When we first met, I was so nervous about first impressions. I even hid my face so you wouldn't see. How do I be a friend? All I have to do is be nice, is what I thought. But I'm starting to realize being friends is more than that, isn't it? Susie, sometimes she isn't nice at all. She's selfish, she's rude, she's sarcastic. But isn't it wonderful that she's her? Is what I started thinking today. I just wonder what being Ralsei-like even is.
I recite these lines not just to showcase the Ralsei-like quote that I referenced earlier, but also to point out that this is the first time Ralsei has ever questioned what it means to be him, and it's because of Susie's influence. Ralsei's developing friendship with Chris and Susie is so important to his character, and this is why I've never been able to buy any of those theories where Ralsei was secretly evil the whole time and becomes the Joker in Chapter 7.
I'm the Joker, baby.
I mean, if you think anyone is ontologically evil in these games, I feel like you maybe missed out on some major themes, but I digress. Ralsei is not evil. Ralsei is sweet and kind and well-intentioned, and most importantly, he cares about Chris and Susie. Even if Gaster's motives are sinister, I have to believe that Ralsei thinks he's doing the right thing, because he would never intentionally hurt his friends, or anyone else for that matter. I mean, just look at the health he gets from Chris and Susie T. He loves them. Being alongside them on this adventure is allowing Ralsei to grow as a person and discover who he is outside of being a tool. Now, with this in mind, let's get back to my dumb knight theory. We've established that Ralsei knows how the events of the game are supposed to play out based on the prophecy. But fun fact, did you know that the prophecy never mentions the knight? It mentions the Titans and the Angel's Heaven as the big bads to defeat, but it never once mentions the figure that's supposedly going to bring them. Not only that, but Ralsei himself has never mentioned the knight. He hasn't even spoken up during a conversation about the knight once. I think this lends itself to the idea that Ralsei knows the truth. He knows what knights really are, that they're on a wild goose chase, but because this convenient misunderstanding is helping to move the prophecy along smoothly, he chooses not to speak up. Another classic Ralsei lie through omission. Chapter 6 is where this all coalesces. As previously mentioned, the heroes have already defeated the person they thought was the knight, but they found themselves in an all-new dark world, terrified and confused. How has another fountain popped up if they've already stopped the knight? This is where Ralsei has to come clean. He has to admit to Chris and Susie what a knight really is. How he's known the truth the entire time and that he's let them believe otherwise because it was convenient for him. I think it's also possible that Ralsei doesn't want to close the Chapter 6 fountain. After all, the roaring is part of the prophecy, which means that Ralsei wants it to happen. In his mind, they're almost at the finish line, and stopping the roaring from happening, diverging from the prophecy, would be unthinkable. Even if things don't go that way though, we've seen all the way back in Chapter 1, the astronomical level of crash out that happens when Susie feels that she's been betrayed by a friend. A fight is going to break out either way, and thus our battle against the pawn is what tops off Chapter 6. Ralsei has to make an incredibly important decision here. So many of the game's themes come to a head at once. Identity, personhood, Fatalism? Divinity? Friendship? Does Ralsei stay on his predetermined path, continue to be Gaster's tool and fulfill his purpose? Or does he reject his creator, recognize himself as his own person, and create a new future with his friends? I can't tell you where the story goes from here, because this isn't our decision to make. It's Ralsei's. And for the first time, Ralsei's choice matters.
We did it, Cammy. Another case solved, pretty much good enough. Shame the poor kid had to get mixed up in all of it, though. Can only hope he makes the right choices from now on. Now I've got bigger fish to fry. You! Tell me everything you know about December holiday.
But sir, I'm literally just a little guy.
Will Cammy solve the mystery of December holiday's disappearance? Will Gaster's dastardly plans be found out once and for all? Will this question even be relevant by the time he's done with the next video? Subscribe to find out next time.
Oh my god, I actually got it out before the game dropped. Before I start talking about the state of the channel and everything, I just want to extend a few thank yous to the people who really made this video special. Thank you to Mimiyori for the thumbnail art. Thank you to Seek for the 3D modeling of the intermission scene backgrounds. Thank you to Momo Sweet Peach for the character illustration for the intermissions. Thank you to Wheelie Scoot for the ending animation. Thank you to Snarlinger for the ending piano piece. And thank you to Space Core for help with modding Deltarune. The video simply could not have been what it was without all of your help, and I'm so grateful and so happy with how everything came out. Oh, and also thank you to the Winterer for providing a single voice line in this video. That's right, there's a single soundbite in this video that is in fact not me talking, but the Winterer. Did you notice? Tell me if you noticed, I guess. With that out of the way, I'll give you guys an update on sort of the state of the channel with Deltarune coming out and everything. When I started this channel out, I had 4 theories in mind. And this was the third of those 4 theories. But as you may know, Deltarune is coming out right motherfucking now. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get the finale to these 4 original theories out before the game drops. It's the big final theory about Gaster and Des and the true link between Undertale and Deltarune and what I think the device is and blah 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 blah. Basically everything else that I didn't cover during these first 3 theories. But who knows what the fuck's about to happen when these chapters release. So here's the plan. I think you guys can expect a few non-scripted videos from me coming soon after the chapters come out, just discussing the chapters with you guys and all my thoughts on them. After that, I'll assess what theory's coming next, because, I mean, hey, if the current theory I have in the works is unaffected, then maybe I'll just get to work on that, but who knows, maybe there'll be another theory based on the new chapters that I want to start working on. And I'm also thinking about maybe putting out some, like, lower effort content in the meantime, you know, like that tier list I did with Snarlinger. I'll probably do something else with Snarlinger eventually. I'd love that man. But also, maybe look into some other collabs, who knows, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'll keep you guys updated on what I'm working on. Now it is time for the Patreon shoutouts. First of all, thank you to my $3 patrons, the Little Freaks. That includes Avery Martin, Brody, Devi Wevy, Duck Quack, E-God, I'm Bowza, Irupop, Joe, Lilin, Lich or Something, Madeline, and Paisley Salts. And thank you to my $5 patrons, the Average Freaks, including Colton Tyndall, Dr. Z, Ellie is Gay, Exori, Juicimated, Lady Edekin, Momo Sweet Peach, Moth Bites, Nova Deluxe, T-Pat, The Awesome GN, and Visible.
And thank you to my $10 patrons, the huge freaks, including Void Teeth, Muffins, Orange Julian, and V. And of course, thank you to the bafflingly generous Chaos and Tybee Fitzhugh for staying on the $69 joke tier all this time. I can't thank you two enough. You make these videos possible. Well, I guess I'll see you all on the flip side. Next time we talk, Deltarune is going to be out, and we're going to be, not to be too dramatic, but we are going to be different people. Suppose I'll see you all on the other side. Love ya.